Hello, my name is Paul Fenn. I'm here with Julia Peters, who's political director of Local Power, which is our company that focuses on community choice aggregation, a movement here in the Bay Area, and Charles Schultz, the development director of Local Power. I'm the president of Local Power, and we are very involved in both bringing the movement for energy localization and energy independence to communities in the Bay Area, but also throughout the United States. And we've been in a discussion about the opportunity of reinventing energy, the tabula rasa. Community choice aggregation, or CCA, is essentially a peeling off of energy supply decisions from the PG&Es of the world, the incumbent electrical monopolies that provide monopoly service to most communities in the United States with some degree of deregulation. And this environment of partial deregulation that CCA emerged. Now today, there is an opportunity with a movement centered in the Bay Area, started by the city of San Francisco, Marin County, Sonoma County, and now quite a few other counties, including San Luis Obispo, Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito, San Diego, Yolo, the town of Arcata, and Humboldt County, a sizable movement of communities that are mostly focused on how to green their power, how to localize their power, how to reduce carbon. In the United States today, there are 1,000 municipalities serving 5% of the population under this structure. So it's an important discussion about an important opportunity in a country whose energy policy is in a state of collapse today. The ability of the United States government to bring green power to the U.S. compared to China is embarrassing. China will be the largest solar market starting next year in the world. Just as an example, but obviously Europe has outperformed the U.S. The Obama administration has become permanently associated with nuclear power, and probably will soon be permanently associated with the Keystone Pipeline and the exporting of domestic natural gas to Asia to build its economies. So in this context of failure, where we've just passed 400 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, the feared date has arrived at which the point of no return appears to be upon us. In that context, community choice aggregation, this movement of San Francisco, Sonoma, Marin, and the other cities, as well as the 1,000 other cities in the U.S., might be a major opportunity to break this gridlock against change in an energy industry that has so much lobbying power, so much hubris, that it has successfully blocked solar power, it has successfully blocked energy efficiency, electric vehicles, you name it, cross-technology. And yet the question that we have encountered in trying to persuade municipalities and communities to take this opportunity of a clean slate has led to some significant frustration and some challenges that we want to talk about, so that we're not simply claiming a success, which is really the opportunity to take this policy and use it as a disruptive means of change rather than the traditional means of regulating utilities, establishing incentives, tax incentives, or various incentives to get the big monopolies to accept change, which has not succeeded. Should we start a little discussion about that? I mean, Charles, you have been involved with the Marin Energy Authority and its hearings. You've also been involved in San Francisco with our efforts there. And let me just go in just a little more on the subject of that opportunity, because you mentioned, Charles, the challenges of how far and how fast change occurs. The word change is this sort of mesmerizing kind of word that appears to mean the same thing to all, but really means nothing.
Like hope.
And so, what do you mean change, right? And you could go to any CCA and say, do you want greener power? Of course we want greener power. You could go to PG&E, they give you the same answer. Do you want cheaper rates? Of course we want cheaper rates.
Well, I think that the one thing that, we mentioned all of the sort of climate issues, but 1 in 6 Americans is on food stamps. And the importance of something, a statistic like that, is that the wealthy places, the places that are interested in environmental achievements, do not feel the economic collapse. They don't feel the need, in essence, to make things real, so that you could have a green CCA, but that it wouldn't have to be real, right? It wouldn't have to have that kind of impact, because basically life is nice. And so it's a weird catch-22. The kinds of places that need to have real significant changes in terms of local investment are often the kinds of places that there's real sort of political kind of impoverishment. You can't get things to happen. Whereas here in the Bay Area, you can get things to happen, but often the communities that lead are the most wealthy, and so there's I think a kind of disconnect there somewhere, that they don't have the same sort of fire under them to do something substantial to change, and they're much more willing to accept representations of a good idea as the real thing, because the wolf's not at their door. They're not really feeling it. It's completely intellectual, or maybe kind of sentimental, but not deeper than that.
It's a sort of a superficiality to American politics that our idea of green is a hybrid automobile. Our idea of green is a lead home, right? Our idea of green is invariably an expensive commodity. That we need to buy more expensive commodities in order to be greener, which has a certain oxymoronic quality to it, and yet it is the wrapper in which the idea of green is wrapped in the United States.
Or a particular technology, and the discussion revolves around technology rather than the political will and power shifting and work that it takes to fundamentally rethink how it is that energy is delivered, which is, we don't lack for the right alternatives, but we do lack the political will. It really is a question of will, and the hybrid would be a good example, which is a very compromised version of what should have been a mass, we should be at mass production of electric cars right now. The electric car was killed. It was in some ways in handshake with environmental organizations which worked with the big auto and oil and gas, really, but auto companies to come up with this sort of more moderated compromise. And, the hybrid, there were Japanese cars in 1972 that, got the same mileage as the hybrid, so it's something, it's not only of a packaging, but it's sort of more insidious than that. It's represented as something that is real, but in many ways, of course, is not. And that's kind of the insidiousness, I think, of some of these
Are those connected? I mean, I think one is that people think of themselves as consumers, and so they think of all of their relationship to, say, virtue, doing the right thing, in terms of buying. Like you say, well, in the case of anything that has an environmental value, is more expensive.
the organic food.
But again, that political will, right, is also that thinking of yourself as a consumer is thinking of yourself as a kind of lonely individual.
You think of yourself as a citizen, really, right?
Right, or you think, and in that sense, are you thinking about production? Are you thinking about how things are made and what your relationship is to production, rather than what do I buy?
What do I buy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's where energy efficiency has, in the technology discussion, is always treated as the ghetto. It's ghetto technology, where the fetishization of technology focuses on solar.
Right.
Largely because of symbolism of it and the beauty and the elegance of it. But what is energy efficiency? Right? It's the absence of consumption. How would I be excited about a light bulb that uses less energy
Or your
to create the
refrigerator
same
that turns
light.
off for 15 minutes.
I mean,
or,
how do you make
I
that
know.
exciting in a commodity kind of way? It's just not working. And so energy efficiency is put into a subsidy environment where the state has to order a collection of
certain
funds,
goals,
and the
right.
funds are allocated to the monopolies. The monopolies administer the funds to
Yeah.
third parties who
Like cleaning
implement
up
them.
litter or something.
Yeah, and then the utilities have systematically burned that and wasted that
Yeah.
money because they don't want to reduce their sales.
Of course not.
Well, that's one of the first things that I heard you talk about was the fact that a vertically integrated utility, whose primary sort of commodity that they deal with is fuel, cannot suffer those losses.
Yeah.
PG&E cannot be as green. It doesn't matter how many environmentalists, in San Francisco want to hold hands with the big company and say we can do it. They can't do it. And also, and this is back to CCA, nor can the public utilities. I mean. LADWP is constrained in many of the same ways that a private corporation is constrained. This is this bypass thing. And I guess we're trying to talk about what are the frustrations or what are the barriers, but it is unique to a CCA. Sonoma or San Francisco will be able to do things not merely because of public control, but also because they don't have those conflicts.
Maybe we should put a little meat on the bone on that, because that is how far, how fast is sort of the key question, and it's a normative question for the general public who don't know really what's feasible, what's economically feasible. And so what do? They turn on KQED, who have the UC Berkeley economists and energy specialists who come on and say, well, we can't really do this right now. You got to wait 20 more years, and so we'll have natural gas as a bridge fuel and keep trying to do it. Now, CCAs, of course, are different animals from the utilities economically because they don't have lots of power plants that have lots of debt attached to them and lots of other infrastructure to deliver the services from those plants that have other debt attached to them. And so looking at the CCAs in the Bay Area, which we have in great detail in the past 10 years, you have the opportunity in the model that we prepared for Sonoma County for a 67% localization of the energy supply to that county based upon the local resources, the local pattern of energy usage, and then the current prices for system power versus the current installed prices for solar, geothermal, wind, efficiency, power storage and electric vehicles, building automation, thermal envelope retrofits, etc.
How many years was
you
that?
combine those? That's a few years ago.
No, but how many years is that 67% localization take
Oh,
place
it could
over?
be implemented in a 5-year period.
So by 2018, Sonoma could be 67% localized with renewable energy and efficiency, whereas the state's goal is by 2020.
And it wouldn't have to pay
33%.
higher rates. It wouldn't have to pay higher bills. The public would not feel the change, even though the change would have been profound.
Yeah. They're renewable portfolio standards, but they're also what we call the local portfolio standards. So PG&E is looking at a very centralized version of their renewable energy. It's not a localized version, which is what we're looking at, to give a community much more energy independence, to give it much more control over its generation of that electricity at the same rates as PG&E. And it is not constrained specifically by what PG&E is constrained by, which is it is chartered. It must produce profit. And so for anyone to believe that the solution is a market solution profoundly misunderstands that point. PG&E must make a profit selling energy. It can never do what a community choice aggregation model can do in that respect. Community choice aggregation can decentralize and create a renewable and energy efficiency model that does not have the same profit incentive and requirement as PG&E. So that makes it so fundamentally different, and it's a great opportunity. And those opportunities are not necessarily being taken by these communities at the level that they really could be. And that's sort of a frustration for us.
But it's been and the public is frustrating because the idea of electricity has been defined as supply to the general population. That if you talk to, I would challenge any viewer, I would be surprised if there were a viewer who did not think that green power was about buying greener electrons from the grid, and that's what green power is. If you read a newspaper, if you watch TV, That's what it's about. But localization is not about that. Localization is about installing capacity behind the meter, on your home, on your business. It's about installing equipment in your apartment to reduce the coincidence of load between your appliances, to improve and automate the lighting in your buildings. This is localization. And what it means is not just that you're reducing the meter turning around and the payments you make every month to the utility, but it also means that you become the owner of these assets, that you own a substantial part of your energy supply. So the question is now, will Sonoma attempt to take advantage of tabula rasa, or will it just buy renewable energy credits or
And
buy...
Paul, explain what, just, I don't know if, just explain exactly what a renewable energy credit is, just so people really understand.
Okay, the renewable energy credit is a trading system similar to carbon credits trading, which allows the owners of renewable energy plants to sell the renewable attributes of those plants to other utilities that own conventional plants. Those other utilities can then sell the power from their conventional coal, gas, nuclear plants to the consumer as green power, as legally green power.
Or the Starbucks.
Yes, and this was a delocalization strategy of deregulation. Location neutrality being
a way to circumvent
key principle of deregulation, to make the market essentially eliminate location as an economic factor in the cost of service. The idea there was that, well, gee, if we create this demand, then there will be upstream demand that will stimulate the market and cause more investment in renewable energy. Of course, it didn't happen, but it did allow people to make lots of money by doing nothing, which is an American specialty.
And also greenwash the conventional power supply, right?
And then discredit the idea of green power by confusing the public so much that they're bored and depressed and want to move on. And
just want it to be green.
So no, renewable energy credits are
However they understand
controversial, and sometimes they have to be used in order to achieve certain goals. But they are essentially an idol, which harms a location-based approach to energy and confuses the public into thinking that they're green when they're not. Similar to driving a hybrid automobile. Makes you feel green without actually changing anything.
So the psychological benefit trumps any kind of real change in the environment or change in the economy.
And as you say, people in affluent communities are particularly susceptible to these sorts of distortions.
Life is nice.
Well, because they're therapeutic. You feel good.
Exactly.
Right? If you feel you can save the world with an organic coffee filter, every morning when you have the coffee, you feel a little bit happier.
It's like green with green cash solutions, like cash, green. It's
indulgences, green indulgences, where you feel that you feel therapeutically affected by consumption, by a new form of consumption.
In a particularly insidious way, and a lot of people watch the show will be familiar with this example that has been used of the Starbucks coffee, where you pay an extra 5 cents and it helps children in a Guatemalan village or something like that. And the idea is that you can have consumerism. You can live your life exactly the same way that you did yesterday, and you can also be doing this non-consumer thing, this anti-consumer thing, this you be a good guy and a bad guy at the same time, and it's sort of perfect.
Right.
I think that makes sense as to why those communities sometimes are very superficial about what they're willing to do, even when they have the opportunity. But I mean, it's still a question of if it's possible, say, for Sonoma to be 67% localized, renewable, and efficient in 5 years. Why doesn't that happen? I guess. I mean, is that what are the qualities of bureaucratic or political or activist frustration and failure in that with that opportunity? Is it that it's not credible? Is it people say they go out to the market and a huge energy company that's going to sell power to this community now says, oh, you can't really do that?
Yeah. Well, if you look at the Golden Gate Bridge, it took 20 years from the time it was first proposed to the time that it was built. The first great bridges like that, they required leaps to be taken, and the formation of the bridge districts in New York City by Robert Moses took great leaps, and in fact he had to take a sort of a guerrilla approach and go around scouting out the rights of way for his bridges and highways across New York and secretly acquire them and then hire thugs to throw everybody out and all sorts of crazy manipulations to make this very difficult thing to happen. Now today we have something, ironically, because of miniaturization of technology, there's no damage, right? I mean, our model for San Francisco, the Clean Power SF program there, another CCA, would implement 1,000 generators throughout the city. These are solar panels, so they're on the roof, right? There's no greenfield impact, there's no environmental impact, nobody gets hurt. There's heat capture on boilers, there's some windmills, there is a wind farm, so there's some damage of having a wind farm, but we're looking at retrofit opportunities. But there's no freeway where you're smashing the whole city or displacing 10,000 people, right? You compare, a bridge requires displacement. And this has no displacement. There's literally no reason not to do it. And yet we live, as people say, in a time now where there is no kind of great courage within the political establishment. You don't have Huey Longs today that build hospitals for the public. You don't have Robert Moses's. You don't have political leadership that wants to do things.
Well, especially at this scale. I think too at the local level, it's a new way of doing things. It's at a much larger scale.
It's very great scale.
And yet it can be completely costed out. The energy usage is one thing you look at, and where the generation makes sense. And it is sort of like a Swiss watch that it can be completely rationalized and explained, and I think I think it's largely I think courage is sort of the right thing, because it's not been done before exactly. People get focused on the fact that there are a lot of different moving parts. The one technology works here, one works here. It's connected to usage. Again, it can be fully rationalized and explained, and has been repeatedly. And yet it's not how things have been done for 100 years. You know what I mean? I think somehow people can't quite transition. We've been tussling with this. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also have the problem that in America that number one, the media are owned by basically 5 corporations, and they're a bunch of right-wing scumbags.
Yeah.
Number two, that the elected officials are corrupted through the absence of campaign finance laws and are corrupt or stupid.
Yeah.
And number three, the bureaucrats are protected by their union positions.
Right.
They're demoralized by a lack of control and a lack of freedom
and they're
within
not
their
accountable.
hierarchies.
So they're going through subsequent electoral, phases, and
and they're Quasimodos.
It becomes a
they
kind
have
of stasis.
Quasimodo complexes, which is I could never do anything, and so you can't either.
Well, there's risk aversion, which is sort of somewhat common to the bureaucrat.
Yes.
And then there's the issue of credit. Like, am I going to get credit for just giving up control,
the credit
right?
problem,
So the consultant's coming in and saying, "Hey, we can do this. Let's
So that's the question: will this opportunity be realized? You got tabula rasa, the opportunity to reinvent your energy. You've got the legal structure in place. You've got approved entities under service. These CCAs could change everything overnight. But will they? That's the question that we're talking about today.
Well, also, do they see? I think one issue that we've run into too is, for the city, the county, they hold an enormous amount of power. Actually, different kinds of authorities, revenue authorities, franchising, various authorities, that I think they're still coming to realize just how powerful they really are.
And again, this is about the challenges of an opportunity.
Yeah.
America obviously is a very problematic political landscape. We have a president who has essentially taken hostage all progressives in this country, has abandoned renewable energy in effect, has embraced and become the leader of nuclear industry revival worldwide. We've got the EPA now and the Department of Energy now headed by drones from the nuclear establishment and
fracking establishment.
And fracking establishment. I mean, there's nothing that this president has done right if you believe in climate change and not fairies. And so if you don't doubt the reality of climate change, you should be very alarmed. And so the importance of this question, it's not merely about CCA or the importance of the movement, but the opportunity that if we actually had the opportunity to stop nuclear proliferation, which we did, would we take it? No, we didn't, did we? And so now we got this out of control problem. And now today, with CCA, in the Bay Area, where you have a critical mass of public opinion that would be 100% support. I mean, there would be 3 born-again Christians that would disagree with the program in San Francisco, and so there is no issue as far as public opinion. And yet, there is a weakness of critical mass in the political leadership. There is, I would say, a vague hostility in the bureaucratic leadership of these governments toward taking the opportunity to lead, which they would claim to want to do, to the man. And then there's the activists, and they're really the raw material of this change. They're the ones who really decide what happens, even though I think many of them are not aware of their power, speaking of not being aware of power.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get into that before the time is up around the challenge. And you've organized activists your whole life, and it's all about this whole interesting thing that happens in movements. It happened with Fidel Castro when they took over Cuba and he started killing all his friends. What happened? Stupid things happen in great moments. And so it's like that now, I think, with CCA, where you have, it's wonderful. I mean, so the idea of the whole Bay Area embracing conceptually this direction and having the power to implement and actually going ahead and forming these programs, which they are doing, is very exciting. But the question is, will they just do renewable energy credits, just do what everyone else did and imitate them so they can stay safe? Will the activists know the difference? Because there's nothing similar between a renewable energy credit and a localization. One is adding new commodities for you to buy and pay extra. The other one is eliminating demand and sharing the savings between the community and the customer, and a general loss of control of the service by the corporation that provides the electrons. There's nothing similar about them. But is there literacy among the activists to know the difference, really, and to know how profound it is? I'm not sure of that. I haven't seen that.
2 elements that you talk about. One is, and in the Bay Area, you have probably the most sophisticated activists that you'll find in America. So I don't know if it is sophistication. I think it's really important. It's important to have sophisticated activists. I think, but it's courage too. And you talk about this, which is being able to line up behind a good idea, or being able to have the judgment to
and also the tenacity to hold on to it.
Right, but in the absence of knowledge,
right?
Everybody talks about it. You hear everywhere in the Bay Area, if you want to do something big, even the most dedicated activists, they will talk to you about risk.
Yeah.
As though, there's some actuary that can come down from the sky and tell you exactly how risky, you can do this and you can't do that. It's not a question of risk. We know that the risk of this kind of inertia is almost unbelievable. The environmental, civilizational changes and destruction that we're looking at is terrifying. It's not a risk. But I think it's more of a lack of courage. I think it's more of an inability to expose oneself, or whatever, maybe be tenacious.
Not is the risk.
Yeah.
Would that be our jumping off for the next segment?
Well, I guess it
think we're wrapping up,
would. Fascinating discussion, and we encourage the viewers to learn about Clean Power SF in San Francisco, Sonoma Clean Power in Sonoma, and Marin Clean Energy in Marin. Read up on the web, on the news. If you Google Community Choice Aggregation, you'll find it. There are hundreds of news stories in the past year, and it's a very important moment. Please get involved. Thank you very much.